It's definitely a crazy time of year. We're trying to get through year-end giving, but also planning for 2024 and the upcoming year. So I have Julie Boll on today as my guest talking about reflection and how we can use reflection to help push us through the end of the year, celebrate our wins, learn from the things that didn't work as well as we wanted, and have a better 2024 to make sure we smash our goals and keep things moving forward. Julie Boll is a certified Dare to Lead facilitator and teaches people how to lead and live more courageously using the Dare to Lead framework developed by Dr. Brene Brown. Julie is the founder of Julie Boll Consulting, a consulting firm dedicated to helping people and organizations make the most of their time, energy, and resources so they can maximize their impact on the community. Julie is a former grants professional with a $10 million track record in awarded grants and over 20 years' experience in the nonprofit sector. Serving in marketing, public relations, and grant development roles, Julie is a certified professional coactive coach, CPCC, and a McNeil's compression planning facilitator. Julie holds a bachelor's degree in public relations and a master's degree in education, both from Quincy University. I think you're going to love this conversation. It's not going to require a lot of work for you to put this into action, but you're going to see results in your business and in your organization and in your personal life by practicing reflection and understanding how to take the things that you've accomplished that went great and that didn't go so great and how to use them to do better as you move forward. So I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. It was a lovely conversation. It went by so fast. I probably could have talked to her for hours. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by our quiz, Should You DIY Your Website? This quiz allows you to answer the questions about what it is that you have time, budget, staffing, tech experience, all of the things in order to have the website of your dreams that's going to help you convert more visitors into donors. It's going to tell you if you're a DIYer, a done with youer, or a done for youer. Those are real words, right? So go to thefirstclick.net/quiz, take the quiz, and find out how to best support your website moving forward and get more conversions. Let's get into the episode. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern. Each month, we dive deep into a digital marketing or fundraising strategy that you can implement in your organization. Each week, you'll hear from guest experts, nonprofits, and myself on best practices, tips, and resources to help you raise more money online and reach your organizational goals. Hey, everybody, please join me in welcoming Julie Boll to the podcast. Julie, thanks for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today's kind of more of a mindset kind of thing, but like really being thoughtful about how we approach our upcoming year. And so I'm really excited about this conversation because this is a practice I do in my business. And I think not something that is obvious for a lot of people.
Yes.
We don't want to think backwards too much, but why reflecting and like thinking about how far we've come, like why is that something you love so much?
Yes. So the end of the year practice or just a reflection practice in general is so powerful because what you do is you take a look at like major moments and milestones. You don't have to put it in buckets of work or home or what, but just like what took place this year. I think we're so busy living our lives and building our lives that sometimes we forget to like actually take stock. And it's incredibly strategic to do it. So, in strategic planning, which I do with nonprofits, I walk them through this all the time, but individually, we kind of forget to do it for ourselves. So it doesn't matter what you do. I just think this practice is so healthy to take a look at your year, your major moments, your milestones, and notice moments and milestones don't have to be good or bad. Just what came up this year? What did you experience? And actually intentionally reflect on it and first celebrate and then be intentional about what you want to take forward from that. It's interesting. It can be a 20-minute exercise or it can be a 2 to 3 hour exercise. But yeah, I love this practice. I walk through my coaching clients with it a lot. I've done it in live workshops as well. And it just gives people a chance to recognize what they've achieved, and then kind of, again, learn from what was it that really lit you up? Where
Mm-hmm.
were you energetically really alive?
Mm-hmm. There's so much to unpack here, and we're going to get to all of it, and I'm so excited. But I want to make sure we touch on this at the very beginning because I think going into year-end giving, especially this giving season, which feels very uncertain for a lot of people, we can feel very down, deflated, frustrated, and live in the moment of where we're at right now versus like what have we done. So, like, why is right now the perfect time to do this, just even to build up team morale and like push through to finish the rest of the year strong?
I think, again, it comes to energy. And it's an opportunity to celebrate where we are today. So, in fundraising, and, even we set these goals for ourselves. And sometimes it's like if we haven't achieved that goal, whatever it is, we're not successful. So,
Mm,
this year in practice really allows you to just pause and say, what am I proud of? And it might be I got thrown this huge curveball, which was my story in my business, and my business is still here. And it's
mm,
amazing. Life really took a turn I didn't expect it to take this year, and the business sustained itself. And I'm really proud of that. The metrics have to go out the window for a moment. I have to pause and look at what that growth means for me. It actually reminds me of a practice in Brene Brown's work called writing the SFD, shitty first draft. Sometimes we have this story about what we've accomplished, and when we stop and actually take inventory, we're like, oh man, geez, look what I did. I did this new partnership. I did this. I did that. I earned whatever this is. Got my kid into this program, whatever it might be. I think I would argue most of us would be kind of impressed if we take the moment. And that's the energy you want going into the end of the year, is like this celebratory, yeah, you were doing good work and we want you to come on board.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're going to talk through some ways to like start doing this practice, but I want to touch on just something you said with regards to like the importance of doing this individually for ourselves on a personal, professional level, as well as us as leaders kind of encouraging this practice for our team as a whole, right? So if I'm a leader of an organization, like how can I kind of encourage this experience and this conversation and then encourage my organization to kind of do this and take stock on this on their own?
Yes, I love that. And so it's interesting. I just had a conversation yesterday on the Beyond the Donation podcast, and we talked about this exact same concept. So, as a leader, I think the most powerful thing you can do is do the work for yourself. Actually, and so I see this all the time with leaders. Basically, this idea that I won't do the work for myself, but I'm open to other people doing it. Nope, you got to do it yourself. So actually going through the process of identifying your own wins and celebrating your own wins as a leader, then walk your team through it. And, what are we most proud of? What are some of the things, what are the skills that we learned? What were some of the challenges we overcame? Where are we stronger because of it? And then what do we want to be intentional about in the next year? And maybe we found out that doing, LinkedIn Lives was something that we just really enjoyed and got really authentic responses from. How do we protect that next year instead of it's just one more thing on my list?
Mm.
Yeah, so super powerful. Yes, I absolutely believe it can be done individually and together. But in order to lead it for a team, you have to believe in the practice and actually do it yourself.
Well, and I think the other part of this, there's been a lot of conversations in my world with other consultants in the nonprofit space, is this idea that a lot of people in the nonprofit world don't feel safe to fail fast and to kind
Yes.
of try new things and get out there. So I think another part of this practice can be like, what did we try that worked well? What did we try that didn't work well, and why? All from a positive perspective, right? Not from like a you did this, but like a what did we learn from this? How do we want to take it forward?
Yes, and that alone is a beautiful practice in creating a culture where it's okay to experiment. So if we think about innovation, we want innovation in all of our spaces. Innovation is putting new ideas out there that have not been tested. You're going to fail if you're in innovative environments. So instead of saying, did we achieve our goals or not, say, what are we proud of? Where do we see growth and where do we see challenge? And what do we want to do with this? That's that sort of learning mindset. The other thing that's interesting is when we talk about daring versus armored leadership in the Dare to Lead work, we look at what environments foster. And one of the things is we don't celebrate milestones and we don't stop to celebrate. And we can perpetuate that as a culture. So by doing this practice, you're really embedding a healthy cultural practice of stopping, reflecting, celebrating, and learning instead of just forge ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is a good practice to do at year end, but like, is this something we should be doing all year long? Like, how often should we be kind of reflecting on where we're at and taking stock of where we're at?
I think that's a very individual question. I follow someone who does a quarterly review, and I've adopted her practice in my business. And I personally really like that cadence. It's, again, just taking a quick inventory on what your intentions were for the quarter, and then what are you most proud of? What came up? We know, if anything, that life is unpredictable. And so, really, to be able to say, this is what happened, black and white, put it on paper, and this is what I want to take from it. I think there's just tons of power in doing that.
Yeah. And then how important is it to be really real with ourselves on, like, I mean, you touched on this a little bit, like, these are the things that we're going to keep doing because they've been serving us, but these are the things that aren't serving us, and like giving us the permission to let go.
Yes. I think that's the key right there. And that is deceptively simple. You use the word permission. In the Dare to Lead work, we actually write out permission slips for ourselves. And it's one of those things, I've been a fan of Dr. Brene Brown for 10 years. And I believe in all of her practice, but I didn't actually put them all into practice. But I've used a permission slip to actually write down. I give myself permission to set this thing down, whatever it is. Can be incredibly powerful. The other thing is are we being real? So there's a really beautiful reality checking tool that Brene uses. And I mentioned it earlier. It's called SFD, which it stands for shitty first draft. If that's not allowed on the podcast, storm me
no,
first
you're
draft.
Fine.
But essentially, what's the story you made up in your head? And then you fact check it and you just write down the facts. It is such a powerful exercise. So it's in the same family of the year in review concept, but you can do it when you're hooked in a moment. And what it does is it forces you to get honest with yourself and challenge the stories that you make up that really drive your behavior.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the granular of it. If I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm all in. I want to do this with my team, or I want to do this for myself. Like, where do we start, and how do we kind of put this into action?
Absolutely. So the easiest way for me to walk through getting granular with us is just the person I'm talking to, Sammy. So if you were going to do this practice, I would say first start with you. And literally, I would say get out a pen and paper, get your calendar out, and take a look at this last year and write down all the major moments, the major milestones. And that's all you do. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you need, just to write down what comes up. And then I would ask you a series of questions. And those questions are going to be, what stood out to you when you wrote those down? What are you most proud of? I actually don't have the questions in front of me. So I'm like, what are all the questions?
No,
The
it's all good.
reflection questions. And in fact, I have this year in review as a handout that I can share and we can make publicly available.
Great.
But I would be asking, or you would be asking yourself a series of those reflection questions. And just the question, what are you most proud of? Like I mentioned earlier, this year took a turn I didn't expect it to take. I really am proud that the business is still healthy. And it just takes you a step back so that you own for yourself what are you most proud of. And then basically the learning piece is what do you want to be intentional about taking forward? And that's it. It's that simple. So you do it for yourself and then you walk through with the team. And you have the team share what the major moments and milestones were. And you have the team answer those questions of what am I most proud of? Where did I develop skill? We know all of those things contribute to the outcomes that we want, but sometimes we're in the middle of it. And so we have to acknowledge the growth without the outcome.
Well, and what an incredible learning experience if you do that with your team, like what you're going to learn, like what they're going to say might surprise you, right? Like different things that are going to come up from everybody that's not all exactly the same. And it's going to also help you get to know your team a little bit better as far as like what they find value in so that you can continue to motivate and lead them forward, in the coming year.
Yes. And you might find out something really lights someone up that you didn't know about. And as a team leader, want to leverage that in the coming year. How do we hold space so that you can do more of that? Because that's going to have a positive impact on the organization as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So how, if we also want to have the conversation of, maybe what didn't work as well as we wanted, or what new ideas do you have? What advice would you give to leaders as far as how to facilitate like a positive environment and a safe space for those kinds of conversations?
This is where you have so much power as a leader to model this work. So you are going to model taking stock of the situation, reality checking, and being intentional about what do we want to learn from this? How do we want to carry this forward? So that we're not saying pass, fail. We're saying let's use this experience and be strategic moving forward. But if you model that work, you're going to create a space where, one, it's okay to fail or to not meet your metrics. And the only way that you can truly give people permission to do that is to own up on your own stuff and say, this is where I wanted to be. This is where I am today. Here's what I'm taking from it. When you can be transparent and vulnerable, you give other people permission to do the same.
Yeah. And I think that's critical because so many nonprofit, especially in the development space, they live from such a scarcity mindset space of like, yes. Well, we are, if we lose this donor, we're done. Or if we don't get this grant, we're done. And so I think that's a great way for leaders to model that, okay, well, we didn't get this. What's our next? Like, what's next? Like, how are we going to do this and have positive conversations? So I love that modeling. I think that's critical and so important. So you mentioned kind of doing this on a quarterly basis. Maybe you do this with your team on a quarterly basis. And then do you kind of put all of that information somewhere so it's easier at the year end? Like you can then go back and reference it and reflect?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I will speak from doing coaching exercises with business owners that we absolutely capture that information. And how that would apply to a team environment is really going to be how you structure your check-in times. And so I do see a lot of organizations I work with where their check-in times or their meetings are almost kind of a show and tell. And you've got to shift it away from show and tell. You can read all this information before coming in. We don't need to all stand up and read our reports. or prove our worthiness. What we need to do is use the collective energy in the room to, again, celebrate and be intentional about planning forward. So, yeah, however your meeting structure works, have just a running agenda, a running place that you capture those wins and those intentionalities and put them on the next quarter roadmap of whatever type. One thing I will say is you don't always see this kind of planning framework in the nonprofit space, and I think it would greatly benefit nonprofit organizations to do this kind of planning as you would in more of a business environment.
No, and I agree with that because I think especially in the nonprofit space, we don't necessarily we have several different campaigns or things that we're trying to raise money for. And if we don't hit that goal, then we're like, okay, we automatically failed. Instead of changing that practice to be, okay, we didn't hit this number, but let's be really thoughtful about why we didn't hit this number, or what do we need to adjust next time? And in the reverse, when we exceed a goal, it's awesome, we exceeded the goal, like we just cheerlead. We also don't reflect to say, okay, well, what were the elements that allowed us to exceed that goal so that we could replicate that moving forward?
Yes. And one thing, just as well as like beating ourselves up for not meeting the goal, I think the other trap we fall into is almost like, let's not get too excited when we reach the goal. And then we move the finish line and we're like, okay, so now we're going for this and now we're going for this. And it's like, for goodness sake, you never get to win then. And I do this all the time in my business. I'm like, oh, check. All right, now this is my goal, instead of pausing in the moment. So even I think it works for both. It's healthy for both. Maybe you didn't meet it. Maybe you blew it out of the water, but goodness, let's stop and celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what I love about too your quarterly practice and reflection, and not just waiting to year end, is also in, I know you mentioned we don't celebrate milestones, but like in those quarterly sessions being like, hey, we haven't hit our goal yet, but we have hit where we can celebrate that we've exceeded where we're supposed to be by now. And maybe that's, semantics and terminology and whatnot. But
yes.
Yeah, maybe touch on that.
Well, and yes. So when we do strategic planning, we basically have indicators, leading and lagging indicators. So at the end of the day, you want to reach X. But it's not that you want the money, it's that you want the impact that you're going to have on your clients that you serve. What are those indicators you want to track that are showing that we're moving in the right direction? Mm-hmm. And which ones do we need to jump in and address so that, again, once a year, course correction is going to be a little harder. But quarterly, we can take a look at those metrics and say, okay, again, here's what we're celebrating. Here's where we want to make a few shifts. And, we got to have things to celebrate other than that big cash prize at the end. We hit that big goal. What else? There's just ways to break down those metrics so that we can track and celebrate our progress.
Well, and to that point, what would you say to people that are working in a space, like let's say you're working in food insecurity, your ability to fix that problem is you can't fix that problem. You can make a dent in it and you can make a big impact, but you're not going to get rid of, as one organization, food insecurity, for example, right? You can't adopt out all of the dogs. So I think a lot of times too, we get caught in this trap of, okay, well, I did all this work, but there's still all of these people in this community that aren't being served. So what would you say to those folks when it's like, well, I can't celebrate this because there's still so much work to be done?
You hit the nail on the head. I think this is a common thought. And I would say to that person, we are not helping the person that we want to help by not celebrating our work. And we are not helping that person if we are punishing ourselves in the midst of it. So the whole idea of self-compassion and self-love, you have to be able to show up in your best self to do your best work for this cause that is so important to you. And that means you do have to start adopting these healthy practices. You have to celebrate your wins. You have to learn. You have to go home. So exhaustion as a status symbol is one of the things that comes up a lot when I do workshops, and people resonate with it. I'm like, guess what? You're not really helping your bottom line if this is how you're operating, because your potential to have impact diminishes when you create an environment of burnout and exhaustion for you and your people. That's not helping the people you want to serve.
Because that's leading you to burnout. And if you're leading yourself to burnout and leading your team to burnout, then you're not going to be able to provide that impact, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So hold on to it. Hold on to that fierce energy and love that you have for the people that you serve. And know that one of the most strategic things you can do is take care of yourself and your team so you can.
Yeah. I love this all so much, and I feel like it's something that might feel a little bit out of the norm and icky. So, or like just kind of awkward. I shouldn't say icky, but maybe just kind of awkward. So how many times do we maybe want to work through this practice before it becomes a rhythm and feels like it's just second nature? Like, don't just do it one time and be like, well, that was weird, so we're not going to do that again, right?
Yes, I'll supply unnatural. It may feel unnatural.
Yeah.
And how many times do you have to do it for it to feel natural? For one, you have to do it with others. So, make a commitment to doing it with your team and being awkward at it and systematizing it. The other is if you're on your own or you don't run a team, find someone to do this work with. Because once you see them do the work and you support them doing the work, it's going to feel less unnatural. So I would say, honestly, we led a workshop this last weekend with about 100 grant professionals, and they were in every different walk of their careers. And honestly, I think in 1 hour, just doing the practice changed how they felt about it. So don't underestimate that. Just making space and setting the intention to do it could surprise you.
Yeah, so doing it with your board at your board retreat, doing it with your team, doing it with, if you have core volunteers, like, Is it like, could it be positive to have like your whole staff and board do this exercise together? Or would you recommend kind of having it be two separate types of engagements and interactions?
I do think that reflection as a board is really powerful. And in fact, when we do board retreats, we often start with storytelling. And we want them to tell us a story about just something meaningful. And it changes the whole energy in the room. So again, you think of boards, same with donors, there's kind of this authority to it, but these are people that are passionate about the cause. Giving them time and space to reflect and answer those questions, I think is really effective. I think the questions look a little different, but it's the same concept as what the individual reflection would be. And, you can actually lead this work in a group setting with an individual focus as well, where we essentially say, we're going to walk through it so we all have our big takeaways. And then we're going to share those that feel compelled to share. And then there's just a lot of meaning in the room when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's beautiful. So once we've kind of done this reflection work and we know how we feel about what we've accomplished, what worked, what didn't, how do we take that information into our upcoming then 2024 planning to make better decisions for kind of what we want to do in the coming year?
Yes. So we have to design a place to capture this. And we have to design a practice to refer to it. A lot of times when it's strategic planning, people are like, it goes on a shelf. So for me, it's basically a one-page document where I can put all this intentionality for the next year in place. And then on my weekly planning, I'll set intentions for the day and I'll be able to connect it back to those big purposes. So everybody looks different. It's interesting with strategic planning and nonprofits. I kind of thought I was going to come up with a perfect template that was going to work for everyone. And it doesn't work. Some people want a lot of detail, some people don't. And so I would boil it down to one place to capture it, inspirational language, and then a weekly practice where you are referring to it. And it's like a rubric or a decision matrix that helps you filter all the different things that you're dealing with, the potential projects you're taking on. In the grant world, we always wanted to raise more money, but it wasn't always a good fit. So it's kind of nice to have, okay, is this really going to align with our intentions for next year? Because maybe we want to create more space to launch a new program. Well, if that's the case, we can't keep burning ourselves out on growing the existing one,
Yeah, I love that. I just think I hope people are listening to this and like resonating, because the beauty of this is that it's such an easy thing to do. It just takes intentionality, but can make such a big impact on how we think and work as a team, how we think and work in our own purposes, how we think and work moving forward. So I just think it's a beautiful thing. So I'm so grateful that you came and shared this with everyone today. As we kind of wrap this up, what kind of final thoughts might you want to share with folks, or kind of what additional strategy might you want people to consider as they kind of make this part of their regular routine?
So I would challenge you to text someone or email someone today that you think would do this with you, and schedule something before the end of the year. Send them the worksheet and show up and do it. That's what I would recommend. You're going to learn something from the process. And then from there, you can build. So yes, there's a worksheet that I can send out, we can make available, that just walks you through that process of taking inventory and reflecting and celebrating, and then being intentional about the learning.
I love that. And we'll link that up at thefirstclick.net/233 for everybody. But Julie, there's so much more that we have. I mean, we've just barely scratched the surface on this and all the work that you do. If people want to connect more with you and learn more about the work that you do, how do they do that?
Yes. So my name is Julie Boll. So you can go to juliebollconsulting.com or find me on LinkedIn and follow me there. And basically support nonprofit organizations in this courage building work, which is based on Dr. Brene Brown and her framework and strategic planning. And then I also support the consultants that serve nonprofits, because there's a whole nother set of baggage that can come with serving, just like what you said before. How can I stop and celebrate when the people that, I'm trying to help are still suffering? So there's kind of that mindset sometimes when there's consultants in the space.
I love that. And again, we'll have that all linked up in the show notes. Julie, this time went by so fast, but I thank you so much for shedding your wisdom on all of us in this time. And I think now is the perfect time to just have this reminder, because we are in the throes of a busy time of year. But that doesn't mean it's not time to celebrate and learn. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Big thank you again to Julie for being my guest today and taking time out to chat with all of us about reflecting and this practice of reflection in our planning. You can grab the resources she mentioned at thefirstclick.net/233. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to this episode, or on YouTube, so you don't miss out on any episodes or the bonus episodes that we have. We have 2 bonuses that come out every single month. And while you're there, subscribe and leave a review. It helps us get in front of more nonprofits that are looking for digital marketing support, just like you. For now, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.